Hello, co-journeyers, and welcome back to the Truth So Help Me Good. I am your host, Barbara Landry, and together we continue to explore some of the bigger questions about this journey we call life. Today, my special guest is Tony Stewart. Tony has made award-winning films for colleges and universities. He's written computer software that received rave reviews. He designed a grants management application that was used by three of the five largest charities in the world and led the development of an international standard for the messages involved in buying and selling advertisements. But I'm going to say that I think perhaps one of his biggest accomplishments is gifting us with his first book, Carrying the Tiger, which is a memoir that takes us on a journey of his late wife Lynn's cancer journey, shares with us what it can look like to die with grace, and takes us deep into the darkness of grief to discover how it can lead us back to the experience of joy. So, a very powerful book. Welcome, Tony, and thank you so much for being here.
Gosh, Barbara, thank you very much for inviting me and for that beautiful introduction. That last part, not my bio, but your
Yeah.
response to my book. I couldn't ask for more.
Well, I'll just remind you that those three things, living with cancer, dying with grace, and finding joy while grieving, are all part of your title. So you created that, not me.
Ah,
I
yes.
would love to have you begin by talking about Lynn, because as far as I'm concerned, first and foremost, this is a love story. This is a
Mm,
love story of the most significant kind, right? And that is to journey with our partner through
Through the end of her life.
the end. Yeah.
Yes.
So tell us about her, and if you don't mind sharing a little bit about how you met and how this love story began.
I do not mind at all. I love Lynn very much, even though she died 4 or 5 years ago now. I'm never going to stop. So Lynn Kotula, she had a different last name. Uh, Absolutely the love of my life. And I say that even though I am now in another relationship. And I'm not letting go of Lynn. And part of my journey has been finding my way into another relationship without letting go of the love of my life. Lynn was a vibrant artist. She lived to make paintings, paintings that were out of fashion. I met her 40 years ago.
Wow.
40 years ago this year. It's coming up in a month or two. Um, when I was 29 and she was 39. So this isn't a little unusual. She was 10 years older than me, but had all of this energy. And we met in the Columbia University swimming pool where we both swam for exercise. And at the time, so I was 29 years old, I had been married and my first wife had left me. And I was shocked and bereft and trying to prove to the world, to myself, that I was still an attractive guy. So I started dating again really quickly that summer. And by the fall, I'd gotten, I'm an introvert. You may not be able to tell because I'm sitting here on your podcast talking to you. I can do this, but out in public, I'm very much an introvert. But I had overcome that and I was just smiling and saying hi to basically every attractive woman who crossed my path. And so there we were in the swimming pool where I had swum for years. And one day I said some innocuous sentence to Lynn, like, well, why were you swimming in that lane? You usually swim in this other faster one, which was really the first thing I ever said to her, total stranger. And she was like taken aback and said, oh, well, I was kicking, so I went to a slower lane. And I didn't think anything about that. And the next day, when I went to the pool, for the first time, there she was at the end of my lane doing some leg stretches when I went swimming. So I stopped and talked to her. And later, I discovered that she deliberately stopped and did those leg stretches, which she would never ordinarily do, because she assumed that the fact that I had talked to her the day before meant that I was zooming in on her and was super attracted to her. And of course, I was actually just talking to everyone I found even modestly attractive. But I loved her.
Mm.
She had a quick wit, a sharp sense of humor that in some way um, took down my defenses. I don't know how to say this. I was more relaxed with her. From the minute we started talking, she made some funny comment and I said something back that had not happened to me in my dating life, my married life before then. And I just felt so comfortable with her that I asked her out and we started dating.
Mm.
And a couple of years later, we were married. And that is how I met her.
Yes, and tell us a little bit about you did traveling. You did some traveling. I think this is an important part of your story in terms of the life you were living together. Um, you went to some very exotic places and in a very unordinary way. Tell us
Yeah.
just a little bit about that. I think it's important.
Absolutely. So just to set the scene, so when I married her, she was 41. We tried to have kids for a while, but it just wasn't going to happen. We even saw some doctors about it, but we pretty quickly decided that neither one of us was so dedicated to being a parent, and she was now in her 40s, that we weren't going to adopt. And so we turned to the other way of living, which is have fun without kids.
Mm.
And it meant that we had more time and money, of course, than we would have had available if we had had kids. And a few years later, I had a job where I earned thousands. I was flying like crazy. I was flying to Europe all the time for some of the things that you read in
Hmm.
the bio. And I was earning zillions of frequent flyer miles. So we said, what are we going to do with these things? Why don't we go somewhere really far away? Because now we can get business class for free and take the kind of 12-hour, 14-hour, 16-hour flight that normally I have long legs I would hate.
Yeah.
And we decided to start going to Southeast Asia and then India on trips that we took just the two of us. We wanted to go somewhere far away, different culture, experiences unlike anything we could have here. We went to these wonderful places where we traveled off the beaten track, and it hardly cost us anything. The flight was free, and then we were staying in these tiny little hotels all by ourselves. And as I say in my bio, I mean, I had to learn to eat food with my fingers because in South India, in many of those restaurants, they don't give you a spoon. You're
Right.
meant to eat it with your fingers. And luckily, one of the first times, someone, a total stranger across the table from us, a young couple, they laughed and they started showing us how to do it, how to hold our fingers to get the food into our mouth,
Mm.
the messy kind of food, rice and porridge, without totally making a mess of everything. And I loved it. We loved it. All
That's
those
awesome.
experiences again and again. We couldn't stop.
Mm. So you start the book and bring us right into Lynn, having some physical problems and then learning very quickly that she had cancer. I believe
Yes.
she was, so it's like 2014, and
Yes.
she's 68 at that time.
Yes.
And obviously,
69, actually. 69.
69, okay.
Mhm.
And obviously changes your life like immediately, immediately. Um, and it's obviously a overwhelming diagnosis.
Yeah.
How did you find the strength to rise to the challenge that was all of a sudden in front of the two of you?
That's such a powerful question. And I've wondered about it myself, even while writing a book that describes what it felt like. And I think it comes out of I had done all of these big projects. I was accustomed to running projects that sometimes ran a year or two. I mean, making a movie, developing a standard. These are things that don't happen in a few weeks. And they're one-offs. There are no two of the same.
Mm.
So I was accustomed when facing a challenge to going, okay, I mean, I'm getting very cold here. As I talk to you, I would get very still and think, how am I going to do this? How are we going to do this? What's the next step? What's the next step after that? So I went into an emotional place of there is a way forward. We're going to find the best possible way forward. And I need to research and we need to talk to doctors and I can hold this together and I can help Lynn. Lynn, who was very, very smart, was much more emotional than I was about this, and of course, was the person
Of
actually
course.
living with
Yeah.
the deadly cancer in her.
Yeah.
And she could not, she didn't think like that. And she spent her time trying to hang on to, but I don't mean denial, hang on to as much of her life as she could. have the kind of days that she used to have, make paintings, see her friends, cook delicious food. These were things that were very important to her.
Mm.
And I don't know if I'm answering your question.
You are. It's so what I'm hearing you say, you absolutely are. Um, it sounds empowering f for Lynn that she wasn't will. So first of all, it sounds like you were made for this kind of a situation. You had
Yes.
already had an extensive background in it, which in my belief system isn't a surprise. Like
Hmm.
we find that, everything we do leads us to the next thing.
Yes.
But when I hear you describe how Lynn responded to it, it sounds empowering to me that she wasn't going to just be a victim here, that she had a life that she very much was going to hold on to and did hold on to the end as
Yes.
well. Um, Tell us a little bit about the title, Carrying the Tiger. Where did that come from? What does it mean?
Carrying the Tiger was given to us. About a month after this all started, a friend of Lynn's wrote an email to her that, as I recall, began, "In my Tai Chi group," said the email, "we carry tigers for friends who are facing difficult challenges. The three motions of bending low, picking up a tiger, and putting it on a hilltop far away make that tiger so much less threatening."
Mm,
And Lynn loved this. And she wrote
wow.
back to her friend saying, "Yes, please, I want you to carry some tigers for me. I need this. And could you teach me how to carry tigers?"
Oh, oh, that's beautiful. And such a tribute to such a great title for the book. It just
Thank you.
fits perfectly, perfectly, which again is no surprise, but
A tiny funny story. I
yeah.
didn't realize it was such a perfect title until I had almost finished the book and I had pages of titles that I had tried out that were all much more bland and prosaic. And one day I was out riding my bike in a beautiful park on a lovely day, not thinking about this, and it just came to me, and I virtually slapped my forehead like, "Oh my God, it's sitting there in the book." I had written that section of the book a year earlier, and only then did I realize, of course, that's the title. It's there
Well,
waiting for me.
I love that. And I just have to share. So the title to the podcast is the title to my memoir. And I wanted to think of a title, and I said, I know I've already written it. I know I've already written it. And I looked at my table of contents, and it was a chapter that was The Truth So Help Me God, but I had written The Truth So Help Me Good by accident. I said, that's
Oh,
it. That's it. There it is. So I
yes.
resonate with that.
Hmm.
Uh, okay. So you used a platform called
Hmm.
Caring Bridge, and I think this is really useful and important for people to know about and hear about. Can you tell us a little bit, what is it and how did you use it and what was the value in using it?
Yes, I love to talk about Caring Bridge because it turned out to be so important for
Mm,
us. CaringBridge.org is a website. It's run by a nonprofit organization that raises its money elsewhere, so it's free to use, in which you can set up your own social media site like a very simple stripped down Facebook, the way Facebook was 10 or 20 years ago, where you can put up posts, which they call journals. You can journal, and people can write comments. It has many other features, like you can arrange for who's going to bring you food today, or your friends can set
right,
up a rota of helping you. We only used the communications part. From the very beginning, so many people were emailing us, and Lynn had a lot of friends. We were all these emails that were flooding us when we were trying to see the doctors and figure out what to do. Simply sitting down and having to write more or less the same message to five friends was
right,
taking too much time.
right.
And CaringBridge allowed us to write the news of the day once and put it up there, and we made it private. This was not a public site,
Hmm.
and only our friends could get into it. And over time, we grew to have 200 people reading the
Wow.
posts. And Lynn asked me to write those posts, which is
Mm,
actually how I came to have the original material for Carrying the Tiger.
right, right. And we'll talk more about that in a minute. Um, I do want to talk a little bit about the experience of finding treatment, just briefly. Like what was the what were some of the major um,
Mhm.
challenges, and what were some of the things that really, inspired you and uplifted you, the two of you, in terms of people that you met and people that you worked
Yes,
with?
yes. The first huge challenge is when you suddenly have a diagnosis like this, which just changes your life on a dime,
Yeah.
and is in a field you know nothing about. I didn't know anything about lung cancer. It's basically like being thrown into the deep end of the pool. My chapter about that is titled "Into the Whirlwind."
Mhm.
You enter this world that you know nothing about, which is the world of big medicine, doctors, treatments, and it's all completely scary, completely intimidating. And then you discover that you have to advocate for yourself. You
Right.
discover that we worked with some of wonderful doctors. There were only about three doctors in the whole book whose names I changed because I didn't enjoy our interactions with them, as opposed to the dozens of wonderful, caring people. And I use all of their real names because I love them. But even so, again and again, if we simply followed the course that one well-meaning doctor or another put down in front of us blindly and unthinkingly, things would not have turned out as well as they did.
Right.
We constantly had to be fighting our own fight, questioning, calling other people. At one point, years later, Lynn was hospitalized and they wanted to keep her longer in the hospital. And she was literally going crazy, getting dementia
Right.
from being in the hospital. And I had to yell at the charge nurse and threaten to, I basically said, Lynn is leaving today, whether you like it or not.
Right.
And I'm not that kind of person. But by then, I knew enough about what it was like to represent her and advocate for her that I was confident this was the right thing to do. And that was all very frustrating initially, and then a very hard learning curve that took
Right.
us some years.
Because ultimately, those decisions were yours and Lynn's decisions to make, not the medical, not the doctors, not the nurses. They can
Yes,
give their opinion and give their advice, but ultimately the decision is up to us, to
yes,
the patient.
exactly,
Yeah, and
exactly.
that's important, I think, for people to really wrap their heads around. So I appreciate that. The other thing that is such a gift in your book, so many things, but particularly the open and raw talking about your grief.
Mm.
I mean, you really went deep and vulnerable and honest. The honesty of it, not trying to sugarcoat it, not trying to gloss over it, not trying the magical thinking you referred to. Um, and for a man, not to make this a gender thing, but it's difficult for all people, but it seems to be particularly difficult for some men as well. The thing
Yes.
about grief that I do want to mention here, having studied a little bit about it, is everybody's grief is different.
Hmm.
Everybody grieves differently. And what I really appreciate about you sharing your experience with grief is that because of the you're so open about it, I think you give people permission. You are a great role model for that, for grief, for doing whatever it is a person needs to do in the context of their own grief. And
Thank you.
that's really powerful. Thank you. Because I'm sure that wasn't easy to do. And what do you attribute your ability to do that? Because it's remarkable.
First, I want to thank you for seeing the book that way because that's why I wrote that section. I
Yeah,
wanted it to be not a universal role model because everyone's grief is totally different,
right.
but I wanted to do exactly what you said, to give everyone a window into what my grief had been like so that they, the reader, in experiencing their own grief or in accompanying someone else who's grieving, would be able to acknowledge what it's like and make their own choices in a more informed way,
Mm,
in a more emotionally informed way.
mm,
Where the heck did it come from? It
mm.
started with Lynn. It
Yeah.
started decades earlier in my relationship with Lynn, who insisted that I talk about my day and then my feelings with her over
Right.
dinner.
That's right.
And that I put that anecdote early on, but you don't necessarily, nowhere in the book do I draw these kind of conclusions.
Yeah.
I don't want it to be the kind of book where you get conclusions, but it's like reading a book with clues. I
Right.
put in all that stuff so that you
Yeah.
could, if you're thinking about it, connect some of these dots. So we get to cancer after 25, 30 years together. Um, and I wasn't completely uncomfortable talking about my feelings, but only with Lynn. And then I start writing these posts on Caring Bridge. And the first posts for weeks or even months did not talk about my feelings.
Right.
In doing the book, I have put a lot of information in between the posts, to
Yes.
to reveal what was going on. And so you might not even notice, but the first months of posts, I didn't talk about my feelings back then. I was just telling people what was going on. And then we reached a point after some months of treatment and things going right and then wrong, where it felt like a slog. And I remember I wrote this
Yes.
post
Yes.
saying, it's starting to, there's no news. There's no news in the post. Up until then, they had all been, this is what happened. These are the new test results or whatever.
Right.
And now the only news was, we're depressed.
Yeah.
This feels like a slog. How long is this going to go on? It's going to go on forever. Lynn's going to have cancer for the rest of her life. But when will this bad period end? We just feel like we're stuck in the swamp.
Mm.
And I really almost didn't publish it. I sat hovering over the publish button because until then I had never risked opening that kind of emotion to our friends, the
Right.
readers of this thing. And I published it. And I got back these wonderful comments.
Right.
Tony, thank you so much for sharing what's really going on. And with that encouragement, I started being more and more emotionally open in the posts,
Mm.
to the point where by the time Lynn went into hospice and then died, I was addicted to writing posts in which I talked openly about my emotions. And
Yeah.
that
Wow. What a
that
gift
is
though for you
exactly,
and your community.
yes, a huge gift for me, certainly, because it was a big part of my own personal grief therapy.
Right.
It was as if I was attending a grief group and talking about my feelings every day or two for the months after Lynn died,
Mm.
even though it was really just sitting at the typewriter, often in the middle of the night, and at the computer and typing out what that felt like that day.
Mm. So you've said that the posts are part of the book, the posts and
Hmm.
some writing in between. When did it occur to you, or when did you discover that these posts could be a book?
It was within weeks after Lynn died when I got more comments back from people similar to the ones I just talked about that slogging post, which had been years earlier. Now Lynn had died, and I'm just talking about what it feels like to be in deep grief in the first months of deep grief. And I started getting comments back from friends saying, thank you so much for sharing these details. You're helping me
Right.
with my own grief. Reading about
Right.
your grief is helping me. And I have learned since then, because I myself have now taken a grief educator's course and studied more about grief, that it is a very common thing to try to want urgently to find some meaning, to make something meaningful out of the loss that you've just experienced.
Mm-hmm.
So right around then, I thought, oh wow, maybe I could publish these Caring Bridge posts. And that was the start of it. I, it took years,
Yeah.
and I didn't end up just publishing the Caring Bridge posts. But
Right.
my first draft of the book, which I was not emotionally able to do until 3 or 4 years later, my first draft of the book consisted almost entirely of editing down the Caring Bridge posts and writing only short little connectors between them to explain whatever information wasn't in them.
And didn't you remove the comments when you at first?
Yes,
Which
my
I
very
found,
first,
which is
yes.
so interesting given what you've just said about how they inspired you and you inspired them, and then you
Yep.
realized what?
Well, that I had made a huge mistake.
Mm.
My very first draft, I had nothing but my words and the connectors. And I looked at that and I thought, there's something missing here. And I spent a week going back and finding examples of my favorite comments
Yeah.
the ones that had meant something to me, and putting them in. And it just made the whole thing come alive because now you realized that I was in a dialogue
Yes.
with these wonderful people.
Yes. And it really teaches us something about grief, and that is when we are able to express it, it helps us, but it also helps others because we all, even though we experience grief differently, we all experience grief.
Yes, yes,
So grief itself is universal. The way we experience it is unique and individual. So um, very instructional that sharing is really, it may be hard to do, but it has great value for everyone.
yeah. This is what I'm finding out. Um, uh, I I
Mm,
originally thought the book would be for a very small audience,
mm,
and I had some beta readers read it. That beta readers are people you don't really know,
right.
because asking my friends to read it, I was not going to get fair responses.
Right.
And one of them wrote me back this amazing comment about how reading the book had helped her get through the loss of her brother and his wife. Oh my God,
Wow.
I didn't know anything about that.
Right.
And I started to hear comments like that by far the most powerful, that
Mm,
made me think, I need to share this more widely.
mm,
And that started me on this last year of my life, which was about taking the book that I had written, that I finished 6 or 8 months ago as we record this, and finding ways to publicize it, go on podcasts, talk about it, things like that, because consistently, it's not really for everyone. You have to want to read a book that covers this turf, a memoir
absolutely.
about someone facing cancer, and then the beauty of dying, and that section I think is beautiful. And then my grief, and then the happy things that come out of it. But if you want to read a book, the kind of comments that I'm getting back occasionally, not everyone, I get another comment like that first one. Thank you so much for writing this.
Yeah.
I lost my husband last year, and reading your book really helped me.
Mm,
And that means the world.
of course. Yeah. How did you reconcile yourself to the fact that while this is largely Lynn's story, it's your memoir? How do those two things
It,
reconcile with each other?
I think of that as an iterative process of discovery. Um, I worked on the book for more than a year. Um, and my first drafts, as I said, were, edited Caringbridge posts. But then I started realizing that isn't enough. I need to fill in a lot more about what I really felt like. But all the way along, from the very beginning, I'm an introvert. I'm not really about blowing my own horn.
Mm,
My whole excuse for this, for being public with this, was to tell the story of Lynn.
yeah.
And when you, at the beginning of this conversation, said this book is a love story to Lynn, that's where I was coming from, even if I might not have articulated it then. I wanted to share Lynn with the world, and her beauty, and the way she faced cancer, and the way she died. So I was writing this book and working on it and working on it and working on it. And I think it was 8 or 9 or 10 months in, I showed it to some of those beta readers, to some other people. And one of them, who has written 2 books of his own, just sat me down and said, Tony, you have to understand, this isn't Lynn's story.
Mm,
No memoir is the story of anyone other than the author.
right.
And what's missing here is your sense of yourself.
Mm,
Because even when I talked about my grief in those earlier drafts, I didn't go as deep as I did. And I often talked about I used the word our a lot. I wanted Lynn in it with me.
yeah.
So I went back and I re-edited the book. And in about a month, I changed most of those where I had artificially put her into my emotions. I took her back out and I let her speak for herself. And I can't speak totally for her emotions. I share what she said. I share what we talked about together. And I made the emotional content mine. And it
Mm,
made the book so much better.
totally. So powerful, so honest, so deep and profound. Um, why was it important to you in this last section to have the arc of the story extend beyond I think was it 3 years? What is the time period
It
beyond Lynn's death?
the book goes to uh 2020, even 2021, and oh, excuse me, Lynn died in 2021, and the book
Right,
goes to 2024, so 3 years.
right.
The
Why
book
was that
extended 3 years.
important to extend it?
I really felt when I first worked on the book, I saw I had two choices. The Lynn Kotula story ended when she died.
Right.
And at the time, I really was thinking of it as the Lynn Kotula story, as I just said. I hadn't yet
Mhm.
had this realization. But I thought, that's depressing. And I've read a couple of other books that more or less end when the person dies. Some wonderful books that end when the person dies. But life doesn't end when the person dies.
Right.
And in my own actual life, I had this whole set of interesting experiences during grief and then coming out of grief and then meeting the woman that I'm now with,
Mm,
which was incredibly complicated.
right.
And I thought, oh my gosh, what makes this valuable for me is putting it in the context of an ongoing life.
Yes.
Having this book take you past the point where my beloved wife dies and give you a sense of how that changed me and of where the trajectory that I'm on right now.
Yes.
And that made it so much more complete for me. I should say, some people in writing comments or reviews of the book say they wish it stopped when Lynn died. They just loved that so much, and they
Mm,
cried and cried. And then this last part is like, they wish I had stopped. And other people have written exactly the opposite,
right.
saying, well, they liked the book up till that point, but it really became extraordinary when I went deep into my grief and then started talking about the complexity of trying to live again.
Yes. Yes.
So I'm glad to have both.
Right. What I thought extraordinary about that part of the book. Now, so Cordelia
Hmm.
is the woman that you met and that
Yes.
you're still with, and I'm so happy. I'm happy to hear
Thank
that you're
you.
still with her. What really struck me about that in the bigger picture is there is this concept. It's called growing around grief. I don't know if you're familiar with it, Lois Tonkin.
No, I
And
haven't met
so
her.
it basically is this little picture that some people, it's a circle, and then grief is like a circle within that circle.
Hmm.
And it stands for that grief doesn't get smaller and then ultimately go away.
Right.
Instead, it says grief stays the same size, but our life grows bigger around it.
Yes.
And I have goosebumps because I mean, I have such respect for Cordelia in the way that she held the space for you, for your grief, for Lynn,
Yes.
and for your relationship, you and Cordelia together. And when you describe that, and when you describe how she communicates her willingness to do that and what she needs from you, I got this picture of life, your life growing around your grief,
Yes.
growing bigger around your grief.
I completely agree. I hadn't heard that image before. Um, I use one in the book. When I wrote the sections of the book, it was real time. I hadn't studied grief. I hadn't paid a lot of attention to questions of grief, but I was trying to figure out what is happening to me. And so there are pages in there where I talk about what grief feels like, and I use lots of metaphors. And the one I arrived at when I started to feel a little better, a year or two in, and I talked about it like, well, I'm living, and all the experiences that I'm having are laying more planks down in the flooring.
Mm,
That the grief is there, but I'm building a more solid floor on it. That's the image that came to me. That is actually in the book.
mm.
I like yours better, or Lois's
Well,
better,
I
but it's
I
the same concept.
exactly. And also take not letting go of old memories, but you talk about creating new ones, like when you did
Yes.
the exhibit, and all of a sudden you realize, but my favorite part of this is, I'm going to get emotional, I'm sorry, is that you never said goodbye to Lynn. Instead, I feel like you invited her in to continue to be a part of your life. And I just love that. I just love
Mm.
that for you, for Lynn, for Cordelia, for people who are witnessing this story through your writing. That, we kind of live in a world where it's black or white, good, bad, right, wrong, yes, no. But again, sort of referring to this image. And I think Cordelia really helped create the environment for you to be able to do this by being so open and really incorporating Lynn, who she never knew, into her own life
Yes.
through going through her things. That we can hold a space for everything. We don't have to choose who's in, who's out, who's and I
Yeah,
love that you stand for that and you showed us that.
thank you. And I do completely stand for that. And one of the reasons that I strongly felt that I wanted that last third of the book there, even when some of the beta readers said, I wish it stopped before that because I just loved Lynn and I hated seeing her go.
Yeah,
I wanted to tell that exact complicated story
yeah,
of how it is possible to be super deeply grieving, as anyone would after the
right.
loss of their beloved partner of 35 years, to be deeply, deeply grieving and also with a lot of complications and a lot of bumps and a lot of pushing back, start to let something new in at the same time.
Yeah, yeah. Well, you've done that. You've done that and beautifully.
Thank you.
Beautifully, beautifully. So you may have already answered this, but if you have anything else to say about it, what is it that you hope your readers will take away from the book?
From Carrying the Tiger.
Carrying the tiger.
Yeah, it's I hope, well, I hope that people will see that all of the things we just talked about are possible, but I hope they will also see the emotional complexity and the difficult parts. And I write about physical indignities. I write about all kinds of things in there that I try to be really open so that when you yourself are going through caregiving and feel like you're having a breakdown, or when you are taking drugs where suddenly you might have diarrhea outdoor in a public place unexpectedly
Yeah.
as a side effect of the drugs, instead of getting all embarrassed and trying to hide this from yourself and your friends and pretend that it's not going on,
Mm.
I hope that by my example, the readers will see that this is all normal. These kinds of things are normal. And when you share them, when you let yourself realize that and just proudly say, this is where I am,
Yeah.
this is where I am, and share it with your friends,
Mm.
instead of, I mean, good things came back to us. Good things came back to us. And we could have been so embarrassed and so private. And it would have been a very different experience because that relationship with all of these people who were following along, who were giving us strength, who were giving us concrete advice, because some of them had been through the same thing, but they never told us
Right.
until we told them what we were going through. And then it's like, oh, yeah, when I was taking that drug last year, here's what I did. We gained a lot by
Yeah.
that. And the emotionalness, the willingness to admit that to see that this is just normal.
Right.
It's not that big a deal. It's human.
Yeah.
It's being human.
Yeah.
That's what I hope people
Well,
take
giving
away.
people permission to be human, that's
Yes.
pretty big.
Yes.
It's a pretty big gift.
And besides that, I hope that I've written a book that where it's actually kind of a page turner.
Totally.
And because I sometimes worry that we talk about this and listening, someone might think, oh my God, it's got all this beauty in it, but what a downer. And in fact, I worked really hard to make this book one where you would enjoy turning the pages, even while reading about this kind of material.
Yes. 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 That certainly was my experience. Yeah.
Good.
So
Thanks.
how do we get a copy of Carrying the Tiger?
Carrying the Tiger is widely available. It's certainly on Amazon.com. You just search for Carrying the Tiger. It's a very unique title. There it is. Or you can go to my website, which is tonystewartauthor.com. And there's not only a lot more information about me and about Lynn and photos and videos and all kinds of cool stuff, but
Mm,
there's also a page where if you want to order the book, it lists all these different stores in America and elsewhere where you can click and get a copy of the book. Or you walk into your bookstore and
wonderful.
ask for it. Carrying the Tiger.
Wonderful. Yes. Well, once again, and
Thank
thank
you.
you so much. Thank you for being here today. Thank you for writing the book. Thank you for teaching us so much about a difficult journey and giving us hope. Giving
You're
us hope.
very welcome. Thank you for
Thank you.
having me on.
My pleasure. Thanks, Tony.